Well, in the meantime, European Union foreign ministers are meeting to see what more they can do for Ukraine. Let's listen to Josep Borrell now.
Tomorrow we'll go to NATO together with Minister Kuleba. We'll have a meeting, the Secretary General of NATO, Minister Kuleba from Ukraine, and myself, and the issue will be, as today also, how do we provide quicker arms to Ukraine, especially ammunition. You know that the most important pressing issue today for the Ukrainian army is to have a continuous flow of ammunition of 155 caliber, also 152, but 155 is the most important one.
I'm joined on the set by our European Affairs editor, Armen Georgian. Armen, how is Europe responding to Ukrainian requests at the moment for ammunition and weapons?
Well, just to set out the problem first, Ginny, before I come to that answer. So the European countries have several problems. Firstly, their existing stocks are running low. They don't want to give all their stocks away to Ukraine, but also new purchases take time. Josep Borrell, who we heard from there, he says that it takes almost 10 months to order certain kinds of bullets and for other things like surface-to-air missiles, a much longer period to actually procure things. So what Josep Borrell is now proposing, and this is what the foreign ministers are discussing right now, is this idea of joint procurement of ammunition, for example. Now, is that a solution? Well, there is a kind of template that's been used before, joint procurement in another crisis, the COVID pandemic, when the EU jointly procured vaccines. But as you might remember from all our reporting at the time, Ginny, that program took a long time to actually really kick off. It was fine once it started rolling, but it was very slow at the start. And the question is, how much time does Ukraine actually have? Obviously, Ukraine is not only relying on this European Peace Facilities, as it's called, which is worth 3.6 billion euros, and that is the fund that is being used for EU military support to Ukraine. Ukraine is also, of course, looking to the US as its main military partner, and that was evident in this press conference between Joe Biden and Volodymyr Zelensky just a little bit earlier today.
So what about sanctions when it comes to sanctions on Russia? What's the EU putting on the table now?
Well, one thing that President Biden emphasized in Kiev this afternoon was sanctions circumvention, and that is something that the EU is very much focusing on as well. So while Biden was talking about that, EU foreign ministers in Brussels were talking about the very same thing. So basically Brussels and Washington are evidently coordinating on this question of sanctions circumvention. What that means is, for example, shipping companies that are set up as kind of front companies for purportedly Russian-owned entities that are already under sanctions. So that's the kind of thing that both the EU and the US are trying to coordinate their action on in the coming few days and weeks. Despite all of this, Jeannie, if we just zoom out for a second, note that since the Western sanctions started against Russia, Russia's trade has grown. It's soared with non-Western partners, with India, China, Brazil, Turkey, and so forth. So I think it's fair to say that when President Putin gives his State of the Nation address tomorrow, he will say that a 10th package of EU sanctions will not in any way deter him from his special military operation. But of course, the EU would argue that actually, yes, these various rounds of sanctions, and they are now looking at a 10th package, which they think could be in place by this Friday, by the first anniversary, that is actually having an impact on things like dual-use technology, goods that can be used for civilian and military purposes, on chips that are necessary for drones, on spare parts that are necessary for aircraft, and so on and so forth. So the EU would argue that, yes, it is having an impact, but obviously the EU, being a large organization, can only go as fast as all its member states actually want to move forward.
Armen, thank you for that. France 24's Europe editor, Armen Georgian. Thank you.